All right, so let's dive into something that's been making headlines.
Oh, yeah.
Human metapneumovirus, or hMPV for short.
We got it.
It's kind of like RSV and the common cold. You know how we hear about those all the time?
Right.
hMPV is like their sneaky cousin, and it's been causing a bit of a stir lately, especially with that outbreak in China.
Exactly.
So we're going to break it all down for you, give you the need-to-know info on hMPV.
Yeah.
We're going to cut through all the noise and get you up to speed.
So you know what's so interesting about this whole thing?
What's that?
Scientists officially ID'd hMPV in 2001,
Okay.
but serological studies are showing they're like looking at blood samples for antibodies.
Right.
And they suggest it's been around for at least 50 years.
Wow, 50 years.
At least.
That's longer than I've been alive.
It's like it's been hiding in plain sight, just quietly infecting people for decades.
So it's not a new virus.
Nope.
But why are we hearing so much about it now?
Well, I think part of it is just increased awareness.
Okay.
Doctors are testing for it more,
Makes sense.
and we're just seeing more cases reported, especially in China.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff about that.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
hMPV acts a lot like the flu or a cold,
Okay.
so it's really hard to diagnose.
So if I have a cough and runny nose,
Exactly.
it could be hMPV,
It could be.
but it could also be a bunch of other things.
It could be anything.
How do doctors even know?
Well, it's tough.
Yeah.
The symptoms really do mimic a lot of other respiratory illnesses.
Like what?
So you've got your runny nose,
Okay.
cough, fever, sore throat.
Oh, yeah, the usual.
Yeah, all the usual suspects.
Mm.
But get this.
What?
There have been reports from doctors in India,
Oh, okay.
and they're describing patients with more unusual symptoms,
What kind of symptoms?
like wheezing, shortness of breath,
Oh, wow.
and even some cases of rashes.
Rashes, really?
Yeah.
That's not something you usually hear about with the cold. I wonder if that's specific to certain strains.
That's what researchers are trying to figure out.
Yeah.
We know there are two main genotypes of hMPV,
Okay.
A and B,
Okay.
and each of those has a couple subgroups.
Interesting.
But we just don't have enough data yet
Hmm.
to know if different genotypes cause different symptoms.
So there's still a lot we don't know about this virus.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of unknowns.
But let's talk about what we do know.
Right.
Who is most at risk of getting seriously ill from hMPV?
Well, all the sources we've looked at
Okay.
point to the same groups that are vulnerable to most respiratory viruses.
Oh, yeah.
So that's young kids under 5,
Right.
older adults, and anybody with a weakened immune system.
Gotcha.
And the Chinese CDC, they've been really vocal about the increase in cases they're seeing in kids under 5,
Makes sense.
which is definitely concerning.
So it's hitting those same groups that were hit hard by COVID.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's kind of worrying.
Does it spread the same way? Good question.
Are we going to have to go back to masks and social distancing?
It's a little too early to say how this is going to play out,
Yeah.
but we do know
Right.
that hMPV spreads through respiratory droplets,
Okay.
just like the flu and COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still figuring out
Okay.
how contagious it actually is
Mm.
and what role surfaces play in transmission.
Yeah. Okay.
But as for masks and social distancing,
Yeah.
those are always good precautions during cold and flu season,
Right.
no matter what virus is going around.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. What about treatment?
Okay.
If I get hMPV, what are my options?
Well, is there like a Tamiflu for this?
Unfortunately not.
Oh, man.
There isn't a specific antiviral treatment for hMPV yet,
Really?
but there has been some promising research
Oh, okay.
with an antiviral called Revigerin.
I haven't heard of that.
It's used for other infections,
Gotcha.
and it's shown some good results in animal studies,
Interesting.
but we need more research.
To see if it's safe and effective for humans.
All right, so no magic bullet yet,
Not yet.
but there is some exciting news on the vaccine front.
Oh, yeah.
You know, our listeners love a good vaccine update.
To do.
What's the latest?
So Moderna is in clinical trials with an mRNA vaccine for hMPV.
Wow, okay.
And they've already finished phase 1 successfully.
That's great.
This is huge because
Yeah.
using mRNA technology, it could mean faster development
Okay.
and potentially even better effectiveness
Right.
compared to traditional vaccines.
That's great news.
It is.
So that gives us some hope.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's get back to this outbreak in China.
Okay.
What makes it so different from previous hMPV seasons? Is it more severe, or are we just more aware of it?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
We are seeing these reports of
Yeah.
a big surge in cases and hospitalizations,
Right.
especially northern China. But like we talked about before,
Yeah.
the information coming out of China has been kind of limited,
Yeah. Right.
which makes it tough to really know what the true scale of the situation is.
So there's that uncertainty again.
Exactly.
Which I think can be even scarier than knowing the facts.
I know what you mean.
Even if they're bad.
It's true.
So what are doctors saying?
Well, doctors in India are advising caution.
Okay.
But they're also saying to stay calm.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Yeah.
Be informed.
Okay.
But don't panic.
Right.
We've dealt with outbreaks before.
That's true.
We have the tools to handle this.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
What about the rest of the world?
Yes.
Is this just happening in China?
Well, Japan has also seen a pretty big rise in cases.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Remember, hMPV is global.
Right.
So it's not surprising
Yeah.
to see cases pop up in different regions.
Okay.
Especially during winter.
Right.
When people are spending more time indoors.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me. We've been living with this virus for decades,
I know.
and we still have so much to learn about it.
That's what makes this so interesting.
Totally.
We're piecing together the clues.
Like detectives.
Exactly.
Trying to understand how it behaves, how it spreads, how to protect ourselves.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about the symptoms,
Right.
the risk factors, how it spreads.
Yeah.
But what about the bigger picture? What are some of the things we still don't know?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something we're going to dig into in part 2 of this deep dive. So stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
You know, it's funny you mentioned how much we still don't know about hMPV.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the big things researchers are grappling with right now. Trying to fill in those gaps in our knowledge.
Well, let's dive into those gaps then.
Okay, sure.
What are the biggest mysteries surrounding hMPV?
Well, one of the most puzzling things
Yeah.
is why we're seeing this surge in cases now.
Right.
Like we said before, hMPV's been around for ages.
Yeah. It didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So what's changed?
Right.
One possibility is that it's just increased awareness.
Okay.
You know, doctors are more familiar with hMPV these days.
Right.
So they're more likely to test for it, which means we could just be seeing more diagnoses.
Right. Like when you learn a new word.
Exactly.
And then you start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, exactly like that.
But could there be something more to it? Like, has the virus itself changed somehow?
That's another thing researchers are looking into.
Okay.
Viral evolution.
Right.
Viruses mutate over time.
Yeah, of course.
And it's totally possible that hMPV has evolved to become more transmissible.
So we could be dealing with like a new and improved version of hMPV.
Yeah, that's one theory. To be sure, scientists would need to analyze the virus's RNA from recent cases and compare it to older strains.
And if they find significant changes, that could be a sign that it's become more contagious.
Yeah, it could be.
That's kind of unsettling.
I know.
These viruses are always changing and adapting.
It's a constant game of catch-up.
Yeah, it really feels like it. What about the COVID pandemic?
Oh, interesting.
Could that have played a role in this surge?
You know, it's possible.
Yeah.
Think about it. During the pandemic, with all the masks and social distancing, cases of flu and other respiratory viruses plummeted.
It was like they took a break.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now that a lot of those restrictions are gone, we could be seeing this rebound effect where hMPV is taking advantage of the opportunity to spread.
So COVID may have actually suppressed hMPV for a while?
Potentially, yeah.
And now it's back with a vengeance.
That's a plausible explanation.
Wow.
But of course, there could be other factors at play too.
Like what?
Environmental changes, variations in immunity levels, even something like weather patterns could have an impact.
Okay, so many possibilities.
Right.
Like a giant puzzle.
It really is.
But let's talk about the elephant in the room.
A global outbreak. I think after COVID, it's natural to be a little worried.
Oh, absolutely.
About any new virus we hear about.
Those concerns are totally understandable.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that hMPV isn't a brand new virus.
Right. It's been
circulating for decades.
Right.
Most people have been exposed to it at some point.
Oh, really?
Usually during childhood.
So we're not starting from scratch when it comes to immunity.
Exactly.
Right.
Most adults have at least some immunity to hMPV.
So that means...
It means that even if they do get infected,
right,
they're less likely to get seriously ill.
Okay, that's reassuring.
It is, but young kids, older adults, people with weakened immune systems,
right,
they're still vulnerable.
Okay, what about people who are vaccinated against COVID? Does that affect their chances of getting hMPV?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't have a definitive answer yet.
Oh, okay.
We're still learning about how different viruses interact.
Right. And how immunity from one might affect susceptibility to others.
So it's complicated.
It is.
So maybe a full-blown pandemic is unlikely.
Probably, yeah.
But we could still see smaller localized outbreaks.
That's definitely possible.
Okay.
Especially in vulnerable populations, or if a new, more contagious variant pops up.
So we need to be prepared.
Yeah, vigilance is key.
But not panic.
Exactly.
Okay.
We've got the tools and knowledge to manage this.
Okay.
Good hygiene, hand washing, staying home when you're sick. Those are always effective.
Right.
And hopefully the vaccine that's being developed
Yeah.
will give us an even stronger defense against hMPV.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Moderna's mRNA vaccine.
Yes.
Can you explain how that works?
Sure.
And why it might be good for hMPV?
Well, mRNA vaccines are pretty new,
Okay.
but they've already been super effective against COVID.
Right.
Instead of using a weakened or inactive virus,
Yeah.
like traditional vaccines do. mRNA vaccines actually deliver a piece of genetic code
Okay.
that tells our cells to make a viral protein.
So how does that protect us from getting sick?
So once our cells make that viral protein,
Okay.
our immune system is like, hold up, what's this? It recognizes it as a foreign invader
Okay.
and mounts an immune response.
Interesting.
And this creates a memory of the virus.
Okay.
So if we encounter the real hMPV later on,
Right.
our immune system is ready to fight it off.
It's like giving our immune system a sneak peek
At the enemy.
I like that.
Yeah.
And what's really cool about mRNA vaccines is that they can be developed and made much faster
Okay.
than traditional vaccines.
So we could have an hMPV vaccine relatively soon.
That's the hope. Of course, safety and efficacy are the top priorities.
Of course.
So the trials have to be done carefully.
Right.
But the progress so far is looking good.
That's good to hear.
It is.
But even with a vaccine on the horizon?
It sounds like there are still a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, there are.
About hMPV.
Definitely.
What are some of the biggest challenges for researchers?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles
Yeah.
is just the lack of comprehensive data.
Right. We talked about that.
We did, and even in countries
Yeah.
with better surveillance systems.
Okay.
hMPV isn't always specifically tested for.
So it makes it hard to really track
Yeah.
and know how widespread it is.
Right.
It's like trying to navigate in the dark.
I know, right?
You don't know which way to go.
Exactly.
And this lack of data makes it difficult to answer important questions.
Absolutely.
Like, how does a previous COVID infection
Right.
impact hMPV susceptibility?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Are there any concerns about co-infections or weakened immunity because of COVID?
Those are all valid questions.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people are wondering about that,
I'm sure they are.
especially those who've already had COVID.
Exactly.
It adds a whole other layer of complexity to this.
It really does.
It's like viruses are already complex enough,
I know.
and then you add in these interactions.
It's a lot to untangle.
Yeah,
No.
it is. Another challenge is misdiagnosis.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Because hMPV has similar symptoms to a cold or flu, it often needs a special lab test to confirm a diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly.
And those tests aren't always available.
And even when they are,
Yeah.
it might not be practical to run them.
So someone could have hMPV,
Yeah.
but think it's just a cold
Absolutely.
and spread it without knowing.
It's definitely possible.
That's concerning.
It is.
It emphasizes how important it is
Absolutely.
to develop better diagnostic tools for hMPV.
I agree.
The faster we can identify cases,
Right.
the better we can manage outbreaks.
Exactly.
So we've got limited data,
Mhm.
potential misdiagnosis,
Yeah.
and so many unknowns.
Lots of them.
How does all of this affect our healthcare systems,
Yeah.
especially since many are still recovering from COVID?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Even though hMPV usually doesn't cause severe illness,
Right.
a sudden spike in cases could really strain resources,
Yeah.
especially for those most at risk.
Okay.
You know, young children, older adults,
Right.
those with compromised immune systems.
We've seen how easily hospitals can be overwhelmed
Oh, absolutely.
during a surge.
It can happen fast.
It's a little scary to think about that happening again.
I know what you mean.
So what can we do?
Well, I think it all comes back to prevention.
Okay.
We need to be really diligent
Yeah.
about those simple but effective strategies.
Like what?
Frequent hand washing,
Okay.
covering coughs and sneezes,
All right.
staying home when you're sick.
Right. The basics.
Exactly. the basics.
But sometimes we need a reminder.
We do.
That those simple things really can make a difference.
Absolutely.
So hopefully the research on hMPV, including the vaccine development, will give us more tools to fight this.
That's what we're hoping for.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are the key things our listeners should remember?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is to stay informed, but don't freak out.
Okay.
We're learning more about hMPV all the time.
Right.
And while there are still things we don't know, we're not starting from zero.
Right.
We have knowledge, we have tools, and we have a whole global community of scientists dedicated to understanding and managing this virus.
So even though it's a challenge, we're not powerless.
Not at all.
We can take steps to protect ourselves and others.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay proactive about your health.
Great advice.
Thank you.
And for our listeners who want to learn even more, what are some of the questions that researchers are still working on? What should they be looking for in the news and research?
Well, we're going to tackle those questions and more in the final part of our deep dive.
All right. Can't wait.
Yeah.
All right. So we've gone pretty deep on hMPV.
We have.
But as we mentioned before, there's still a lot we're learning about this virus.
That's true.
And as with anything in health, it's important to remember that what we know right now might not be the whole story.
Yeah, especially with a virus like hMPV that's been flying under the radar for so long.
So what are some of the biggest mysteries surrounding hMPV right now?
Well, one of the most pressing issues is the lack of data.
Okay.
Especially from certain regions.
Right. We talked about China.
Exactly. But even in places with better surveillance.
Yeah.
hMPV testing isn't always routine.
So it's hard to know.
It is.
How widespread the virus really is.
It's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark.
Right. You don't know what you're going to run into.
Exactly.
And this lack of data makes it hard to answer some big questions.
It does.
Like, how does a past COVID infection affect someone's chances of getting hMPV?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Are there any concerns about co-infections? Or maybe having weaker immunity because of COVID?
Those are all questions we need to investigate.
I bet a lot of people are wondering about that.
I'm sure.
Especially after everything we went through with COVID.
Definitely. It just highlights the need for more research.
Absolutely.
We need to understand how these viruses interact.
Right.
And what it means for public health.
So it's like a whole other layer of complexity.
It really is.
On top of the already complicated world of viruses.
Exactly.
Another challenge is misdiagnosis.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Because hMPV presents like a cold or the flu. It often needs a specific lab test to confirm.
And those tests aren't always available.
Right. And even when they are, it's not always practical to run them. So someone could be walking around with hMPV thinking it's just a cold.
Absolutely.
And spreading it without even realizing it.
It's a real possibility.
That's kind of scary.
It is a bit concerning.
So this really highlights the need for better diagnostic tools.
Yeah, I think so.
The quicker we can ID these cases, the better we can manage potential outbreaks.
Absolutely.
So we've got limited data, possible misdiagnosis, and a whole bunch of unknowns.
That's right.
How does this affect our healthcare systems, especially with so many still recovering from COVID?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Even if hMPV isn't usually severe, a surge in cases could still strain resources.
Right.
Especially for the most vulnerable people.
Of course, the young kids, the older adults, anyone with a weaker immune system. We saw how easily hospitals can be overwhelmed.
We did.
And it's a little unnerving to think about it happening again.
I understand.
So what can we do?
Well, I think the key is prevention.
Okay.
We have to be really good about those basic things.
Yeah, like what?
Washing our hands frequently.
Right.
Covering our coughs and sneezes.
Right.
Staying home when we're sick.
Those things really do help.
They do. They make a bigger difference than people think.
So hopefully the research on hMPV will give us more tools.
Yeah, the vaccine development is promising.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the most important thing to remember is stay informed, but don't panic.
Right.
We're learning more about hMPV every day.
And while there are unknowns,
we're
not starting from scratch.
Not at all.
We've got knowledge, we've got tools, and we have a whole global community working on this.
A whole network of scientists.
So even though this is a challenge, we're not powerless.
Nope. We can take action to protect ourselves and others.
That's a good reminder.
Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, be proactive about your health.
Great advice. I think that's a perfect place to end our deep dive on hMPV.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found it informative.
I hope so.
And empowering.
Absolutely.
Remember, knowledge is power when it comes to viruses.
Couldn't agree more.
Until next time, stay curious and stay healthy.